This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Shane, you're going to be so excited. I am officially an insurance person.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, last night I went to the grocery store and I went to grab a buggy and I apparently yanked a little too hard and it pulled two of them out. And the second one went careening toward the bumper of this black late model Mercedes. And so I literally threw my body in front of this buggy to save the bumper of this car because I know what it costs and the insurance repercussions had this buggy hit this Mercedes bumper because of all the sensors and everything in it. And this guy is walking by and he's like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just couldn't let this buggy hit the bumper of this car because of all the sensors in it. And I know what it's going to cost and there's going to be insurance repercussions." And the guy's like, "No, but are you okay?" And so I thought it was so great. You would be so proud of me. My brain is finally working like an insurance person.
That is an official scenario. You've completely made the transition. You are no longer just a marketer, salesperson. You are officially in the insurance black hole. You have officially made it. Because that's exactly what happens to insurance people. They don't think about the injury to self or the damage to their stuff. It's, oh my gosh, what did I just do? What's the claim? And and agency owners immediately go to loss ratio. Is this going to hurt my profit sharing and contingency? So there's all kinds of levels here where you can decide, have you actually crossed the line? And that is a perfect example of someone coming into the industry and crossing the line. You finally have made it to the other side. So I'm proud of you. That's exciting. It's exciting stuff.
Thank you. So what are we talking about today?
I want to talk about the flywheel and the flywheel effect. My background with the flywheel effect goes back to Jim Collins and his book, Good to Great. And the reason I want to talk about it is because for a couple of things. I think that, one, you know how important it is to me, or my opinion, that you have to build a really, really good foundation when you're building a book of business. And I feel like what happens is that agents get bored with that, doing the same thing over and over and over again. And they want to know when breakthrough happens, or they want to know when the time comes where they can expand, or they can test new waters, or open new markets, or something of that nature. And so I want to talk about the flywheel effect because I think it's completely impactful to independent agencies starting out. I think it's important for independent agencies trying to grow from one level to the next. And so I think it's an important thing to think about.
Before we go there, I grew up with this rocket scientist dad. And so to me, before I read the book Good to Great, the flywheel was kind of what keeps the gyroscope going. It's what keeps a satellite in place. So I know about flywheels from that perspective. But I have heard us talk about flywheels before during an orientation or during a conference, and I start getting these texts pop up that say, "What is a flywheel?"
So the imagery for me, and it's not my imagery, it's Jim Collins is what he painted this picture in the book. He talks about this giant, I have this picture, maybe, I don't know if this was him or me, but there's this giant 30-foot huge flywheel, and it's this huge object, extremely, extremely heavy. And your business is like that flywheel, right? It's this, you push on that thing. Like, you've got to push on it a little bit, and you're going to push on it, and then finally, eventually, it moves an inch. And then maybe you have a new person come on or another person come on, and now you're both pushing on that flywheel, and it moves another inch, and then it moves 2 inches. And then over the course of time, it moves a foot, and then it moves a few feet. And then it just finally, you make a full rotation, and then you keep pushing and you keep pushing. And at some point, there's what would be called a breakthrough. Okay. And so this humongous object that is designed to move big things, tons of big tonnage, right? And I'm not a rocket scientist, so just if it's not clear already, I'm not that guy. You grew up with one, I am not that guy. So, my visuals in my head don't always come out the same way. But as you're pushing on this flywheel and eventually there's this breakthrough and it actually starts becoming a little bit easier to push that flywheel. It was really, really hard at first and it didn't feel like you were getting anywhere. It didn't feel like you were making any movement. And then eventually it moves and then it moves a little more. And then eventually it makes that full turn and maybe a second turn. And eventually you're like, man, this isn't as hard as it was the first time I pushed on that flywheel. And then eventually it becomes a little less hard and less hard. And then there's this breakthrough moment where it actually starts through the power of inertia. It actually starts turning itself and then it speeds up and then it keeps speeding up. And unless you slow it down, it actually can run itself. It can push itself and churn itself, and the weight of that flywheel will actually become its own engine. That's my visual. That's my definition of the flywheel that we're talking about here.
So my visual comes from sitting at the Captain D's as a little girl. My dad used to take napkins at Captain D's and he would draw on them with his black felt tip pilot pen that he always kept in his pocket. And he explained it to me much the same way, but also that once a flywheel is going, that it creates an energy source even when the energy is not continuous. So that's why it's so important to have this flywheel concept in your business, having these systems in your business, because there are going to be times where if the flywheel is running, if your processes are running, you're still going to have the same energy output, even though the input is not the same.
And it doesn't mean that input completely stops when I transition this to the business side, because you have to check on it. You got to make sure that something didn't break. You got to make sure that it didn't come off its axis. And so I think you do have to check on it, but it is intended that it does create its own energy. And I think that's that breakthrough moment that I'm talking about. I think those two things are correlated, and that's what Jim Collins meant by this breakthrough. And I think that's the part that I really want to get down into today is how many times do you try before you stop? When do you know to stop, or do you stop? And how do you not get bored with what you're doing to build that foundation? Because I think it's the same thing as building a flywheel. If I start a new agency today, is it going to take me 3 years? Is it going to take me a year? Is it going to take me 5 years? I mean, it depends on so many different factors. But at the same time, if you don't keep pushing on that flywheel enough it starts creating its own energy, you get bored and maybe slow down too early, you're actually impacting the future of your company, insurance agency or not. We're still pushing. It's easier today than it was in 2004. And it was easier in 2012 than it was in 2004. It was easier in 2004 than it was in 1998. It was easier in 1996 than it was in 1983 because that was day one. And today, it's much easier than it was in 2015 because we've pushed and pushed and pushed enough on that flywheel that it's starting to turn through its own energy. So somewhere along the lines, we have these little breakthrough moments. And I think you have many breakthroughs. Several mini breakthroughs, right? You have these little bitty breakthroughs that happen through the process, and it takes you to that next level of energy, that next level of creation where the inertia picks up speed a little bit more. We will be stronger 5 years from now if we keep pushing the flywheel. If we say, whoa, you know what? Let's just cruise. Let's just set this thing on cruise control and back up. Well, there's going to be energy created from pushing and pushing and pushing. There's going to be momentum that continues, but at some point it will slow back down because we stop pushing. That's where I think Integra is that we are trying to push through to the next level, but we can't stop pushing on the flywheel. It's way better than it was 5-6 years ago. It's definitely even more better than it was 20 years ago. But today, we're not there. I don't know. Are you ever there? Are you ever there?
I don't think I'm ever there.
Is any company, is any agency ever there? I'm fixing to go down this marriage deal. I don't know why we end up in marriage counseling on all these podcasts, but am I a good enough husband? I'm ready to stop learning, stop pushing on how to be, am I good enough? I would say probably my wife would say, yeah, let's not stop yet. Let's keep getting better, right? Am I a good enough father? Am I a good enough business person? No, there's this endless pursuit of pushing on this flywheel.
And I think it's the difference in being good enough or being great. So many places in life, we stop and say, okay, well, I'm good enough. When if we push just a little bit harder, we go from good to great.
Yeah, this whole concept comes out of good to great. And there were these comparison companies that they tried to skip the pushing. They tried to skip the whole flywheel effect. We can pick on the VC money. We can pick on the venture capital piece. We can pick on that area of business. I'm not saying funding and capital. I mean, it's important. But show me someone who's just gutting it out and shoestringing it. And I think that you're going to see a different culture in those situations.
So let's figure out how to get my flywheel turning. I am a producer. I am thinking of starting an independent agency. What do I need to do to get started? What do I need to do to get that flywheel moving? What is my push? How do I make this happen?
I think it's focus. Focus and passion are parts of it. There's some getting in the weeds, and there's some understanding how things go, and there's the pushing of the everyday. So you have to be willing to commit to doing something every day. So if we're going to say, I'm going to focus on personal lines, and maybe I preface that with, you need to pick what you're going to focus on first. It's okay if you're going to be commercial lines focused, but be commercial lines focused and find the areas of focus within commercial. If you're not going to do that and you're going to focus on personal lines because that's your background, then focus on the right type of personal lines business. If you want to run a non-standard agency and focus on specialty auto, do that. But I think it's this jack of all trades approach where the grass is greener. I've left the exclusive agency channel, or now I'm a producer and I can do things that the owner didn't want me to do. I was a producer before, now I'm the owner. I can do what I want to do. There might have been a really good reason why the agency ownership didn't want you producing certain types of business. It might not have been profitable for the agency. And so as you get out into your own and you start deciding how to design the flywheel that you want to push, then you have to think about that and think about, okay, what is my focus going to be? And that's really my whole point here. I think some agents get bored or look out across into the myth of greener pastures, and they go, I just crossed that $1.5 million, $2 million mark in personal lines. I think I'll go be a commercial lines guy now. And the question is are you there? Have you actually made it to breakthrough moment? If I'm day one, I've got to pick my focus. I've got to decide I'm going to push the same flywheel. I can't push 3 or 4 different flywheels. I think they're too heavy.
So what if you've been pushing a flywheel for a while and you're just not gaining momentum? Do you keep pushing or do you change flywheels?
When do I stop pushing the flywheel? When do I change gears? When do I go a different direction? The image, and some of y'all will understand what I'm talking about. There's an image of the 2 guys with a pickaxe digging a hole, digging a tunnel, and one of them turns around and walks away, and the other one's still digging, and the one that turns around and walks away is literally like inches away from the diamonds in the channel or the gold, right? So there's this graphic that floats around on social media out there. And that's the question that can never really be answered, in the sense that what if James Dyson would have stopped at 5,120? Or 25, 5,125. If he got it right on 5,126, how do we know that? And so I think it's this, are you passionate about it? Do you love what you do when you get up every day? And are you generating that foundational profitability before you can say, okay, I'm going to go do this other thing over here? And we're relating this back to, obviously, to the independent agency channel in the book of business that we're trying to build. I feel like we get into this jack of all trades scenario. And that's where I'm really wanting to go with this, is we can't do that. The jack of all trades, master of none is one of the biggest things that gets in the way of independent agencies reaching new milestones and new success levels.
To quote our guy, don't dabble.
Don't dabble. How did dabble not get into this conversation yet? Right? I mean, that's great. That's awesome. That's exactly right. We have people that dabble. We have people that dabble and get distracted, but we also have people that get bored because they say, well, I've I've been selling personal lines for 5 years and I just get so tired of doing that. I think there's something else wrong if that's the case. Like, if there's opportunity to launch into different lines of business, then that's okay. I mean, I'm all for that. I'm all for diversification. But I think before we diversify, we've got to be solid. We've got to be really solid.
So tell me your definition of really solid.
Can you invest in this new area without debt? I think that's extremely solid. Can you go do this out of profits? Can you pay yourself the living wage that you need? Can you do that and invest out of your profits into this new area? Can you hire that producer? Or are you going to have to go take out a loan, find an investor? Are you going to have to put a compensation program together that doesn't allow the producer to truly have a success path? You're going to set them up for failure because you don't design the compensation system because you're worried that you don't have the money to design the compensation system. I mean, so all of these things kind of go together. How do you do this? When do you do this? And can you do it out of your existing profitability?
Basically, don't let shiny objects distract you until your flywheel is creating the energy that it needs.
Yes. I think that's a great picture. There's a lot of shiny objects out there. And sometimes those shiny objects come in different forms. It could be a number of different things. And the biggest one that gets in the way is comparables. Comparing yourself to others, comparing yourself to what another agency is doing and wanting to do that when what you're doing is really successful. And so that's a shiny object to me. That's a potential shiny object that could get in your way. I think that's an area where that leads us down that jack of all trades path is we let that comparable get in our way and we stop doing what's working. We stop pushing the flywheel that's working for us, and we try to spin up other multiple flywheels without a real way of paying for that, without a real way of making that investment.
Starting a new agency, what are my tools in my toolbox that I'm going to need to get that flywheel moving?
I need referrals. I need referral sources. I need to understand where those opportunities are going to come from. And I want to start where I live. I want to start where I play, look around. And I'm not talking about, hit up all your family. I'm talking about an area where you are involved in your kids' thing or your community. This is community involvement piece. I think you got to start there, and that's a major tool. You got to build systems around that, because creating that referral environment versus lead purchases and things of that nature is potentially going to lead to churn, and you got to watch out for getting down that path of churn. You have to decide what can you be successful at? And so many of the producers and agency owners from the exclusive channel, producers at agencies, so many of these individuals already have some type of community or plan that they're already working in. I'm going to challenge them to do that. Don't move away from that just because you're starting a new agency. If you're starting a new agency, and the reason that you're ready to start a new agency is because you have this experience of doing something really well. Most people don't start new agencies having not been successful somewhere else. That's just a reality where we are today. They generally have some experience as a producer, account manager, account executive, exclusive agency owner, exclusive agency producer. They've got a background and they've already created this path of success. So why move away from that? And that's the part that I think comes back to the center of this discussion about the flywheel and when do you stop, how many times do you try, and creating that energy off the flywheel. I want to challenge people not to get bored with what you do so well. If you've lost a passion, there's something else. If you've lost passion for what you do, well, then maybe you need to look at the industry itself and say, well, maybe I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Maybe I should be doing something else. And that's okay. You don't have to stay in the insurance industry. We want you to. The independent agency channel wants you to stay in the insurance industry, but you got to be passionate and happy with yourself and with that industry and with the business in the first place. I think if you're bored with something, there's some passion that's been lost.
I've seen this happen several times now. Somebody will leave the captive industry, move over to the independent world, and they spend a bunch of money on direct mail, and then they're so disappointed because their phone doesn't ring. And so I think that's one of the things that people misunderstand when they come from the captive world to the independent world. Those tools that move your flywheel are different.
It's a marketer's world. I think marketing has shifted. I think the big brands are still in advertising spend, lead generation spend is still effective in those worlds because you have the big brand behind you. And I think that's why that still works. It doesn't apply in the independent agency system based on my experience. What applies in the independent agency system is the marketer effect and the community effect. And when I say marketer, I'm not talking about advertising. I'm not talking about spending a lot of money. Marketing does not have to be expensive, right, Miss Marketer? I mean, it doesn't have to be expensive.
It does not.
It can be grassroots based. It can be social media. It can be cause marketing. There's so many things that you can do as a marketer that you can't do as an advertiser. And I think what's happened is, you've got several decades of effective ad spend, brand building in the big brands, the direct channel, the exclusive channel, and agents then move over to the independent agents channel and they go, I'm just going to do that same thing. And that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to just go spend this money. You're going to be severely disappointed, even if it's in a community where, you can still get some radio effectiveness or print effectiveness. It's not going to be near what it was when you had that big brand on your ad that was helping co-opt that and so forth. That's not going to drive stuff to you.
As an independent agent, you are your brand. You're not selling insurance. You're selling yourself. You're selling your services. You're selling your personality. You can't do that with a direct mail piece.
We're trying to be different in the sense that you got to be a David in a Goliath world. If you're going to fight Goliath, you can't armor up and go toe to toe with Goliath. You can't do it. You will lose. David would have lost. I don't know. He was like 100 yards or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the scripture says, but he slung his rock from his sling 100 and something yards away. He did not go get in a wrestling match with Goliath. He would have lost. You can't do that. If you need a comparable, that's it. You have to fight differently. You have to think differently.
And you have to use your strengths.
Yes.
David didn't try to fight using Goliath's strengths. He fought using the strengths that he learned in the field.
He didn't go toe to toe on Goliath's terms, right? He fought him on his terms. That's a key for the independent agency system. We do not want insurance to be thought of as a commodity. And the minute you have that customer that's just commodity based, that's drank the Kool-Aid of the big ad spend, then walk away. It's not your client. Every prospect does not have to be your client. It's okay. I want to encourage you to be passionate about what you do and have a focus on what you do and decide where you're going to build that agency foundation. If it's commercial, let it be commercial. If it's personal, let it be personal. Build your foundation around something you're passionate about, something you see that you can push on that flywheel for a sustainable period of time, and create the type of foundation that allows you to make diversification investments out of cash, out of profit, instead of out of debt. That's the thing that I think builds healthy agencies long term and creates the opportunity for you to be really, really good when you decide to open up a commercial lines division or you decide to open up a personal lines division after you've built that foundation in one or the other.
So I'm going to leave us with a quote today from Ben Hogan. If you can't outplay them, outwork them.
Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
Ready to get the ball rolling with your independent agency? Learn more at IntegraAgent.com. That's IntegraAgent.com. Thank you for joining us on IA Forward. Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now or learn more at IAForward.com.